How's it going, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. It's time to talk about the best comics that I read in 2022. I have a top 20 list here. Let's get into it right now. Daniel Warren Johnson does it again with this amazing hardcore wrestling series, Do a Powerbomb. I remember seeing early sketches on Daniel Warren Johnson's Instagram page of this new wrestling book, but I was not prepared for the impact of the story. Now, I should have anticipated a deep, meaningful story because, based on his other books, that's what we have come to expect. But here we follow Lona, a young girl who follows in her late mother's footsteps, trying to become a world-famous wrestling champion. Sometime after her mother's passing, she is approached after a match by a strange man who is offering her the impossible, a chance to see her mother again. But there's one stipulation: she must win the most brutal interdimensional tag team tournament in hell. I absolutely love the scenery in this book and the insane tag teams our main characters face on their way to becoming champions. The various antagonists we're introduced to are not just mindless one-issue threats, because like our main tag team, they have their own backstories and motivations to win this tournament, which adds an extra layer of drama to the overall story. This book goes into extra innings as well, with a special handicap match against God. So if you're a wrestling fan, and even if you're not, this story was guaranteed to blow you away narratively and artistically. If you haven't done so yet, check out Do a Powerbomb. It's one of the best books of the year. Shaolin Cowboy Cruel to Be Kin was my first exposure to the Shaolin Cowboy, and I can't wait to get my hands on the other stories that came before this run. You don't have to have any knowledge about the Shaolin Cowboy to appreciate this series. In issue number 1, we are introduced to the Shaolin Cowboy, who jumps into action to save a newly born lizard from his heartless cannibal father. From there, Darrow introduces a huge cast of impossibly creative, over-the-top villains aimed at the destruction of our main character. Everything from a giant flying squid controlled by an evil villain with a Napoleon complex, to a building-sized white supremacist bug monster who can throw cars and buses at Shaolin Cowboy. The panels are packed densely with visual overload in a good way, and you can spend an hour just gazing at the details in each issue. The action scenes are non-stop and dramatic, perfectly telling the story without dialogue, and quickly escalates to the point of insanity. The story starts off somewhat directionless, but really shows off the hero's abilities. Then the story turns sharply after a tragic event, making you actually scared for the villains that hurt our protagonist. Our Shaolin Cowboy starts down a path of vengeance, which leads to some amazing battles and paneling, and it's definitely something that will leave you amazed. If you haven't had the pleasure of reading Shaolin Cowboy, pick up the trade paperback and jump on in. Written by Zach Kaplan and drawn by Balby and Marco Lesko, Metal Society is another great exploration of human and robot integration. Set in a world where humans are extinct by their own means, Metal Society explores what happens when robots start to play God, Matrix style, by creating and harvesting humans only to enslave them. The story focuses mostly on the point of view of one human and one robot and their contempt for the way things are. Jumping back and forth between these two characters, the reader starts to realize that both sides are oppressed and taken advantage of. In order to rise up to the top of their societies and settle their differences once and for all, they must face each other in the boxing ring. I think the best thing about this book is the fact that you're surprisingly pulling for not only the human characters, but the robot characters also. This series has a masterful build-up to the main event, which starts immediately in the early pages of number 1 and concludes beautifully in issue number 5. If you're into human-robot survival stories, Metal Society is a must-read. 8 Billion Genies from Charles Soule and Ryan Brown was another book that came out of nowhere and took the comic spec game by storm. I believe it was a combination of unique, interesting covers, amazing interior art by Ryan Brown, and a wildly thought-provoking story by Soule. We start our story by shadowing a band that's playing at a small bar in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. While they're hanging out with the patrons and the bartender, we suddenly see 8 billion genies appear, one assigned to each person on Earth. These genies explain that everyone has one wish and one wish only, and they can make it now if they choose to. What makes this story so interesting to me is the lore around the genies and the wishes themselves. Charles Soule really took his time to plug all the holes people could think of, like how they handle competing wishes. What about babies or young children's genies? And what would the world look like within the first 8 seconds, 8 minutes, 8 hours, and so on? He gives us a visual update of the state of the world in each issue as well. Some people wish for destruction or superpowers, others money or just cool toys. The story broadens from here, and we really explore what our main characters have to do to survive in this new world. 8 Billion Genies has been a great read so far, and I have to admit, I think Charles Soule's approach to the story is probably not too far off to how it would actually play out. This story will be wrapping up here shortly, and I wouldn't doubt if we get a volume 2 at some point, so if you haven't read this, check it out now. Ice Cream Man, written by W. Maxwell Prince, is a prime example of how comics can explore the beautiful depths of human thought, experiences, and tragedy. This book is not for the faint of heart, not because of depictions of brutality or overuse of profanity, but because of how close it comes to perfectly describing how painful the human experience can be. It explores tough topics like addiction, depression, regrets, deteriorating family dynamics, and other heartbreaking moments we all face. Yet somehow, W. Maxwell Prince can explore these heavy topics with a sort of levity and at times humor. Morazzo and O'Halloran's art perfectly matches this dark storytelling by giving us hauntingly creepy characters, monsters, and scenery. Each issue can be considered a one-shot, although for longtime Ice Cream Man readers, you'll notice some reoccurring themes and characters which are used to reinforce the current issue. These moments are mostly used as Easter eggs or winks to the readers, but don't impact the overall story. Ice Cream Man is truly one of the best comic experiences if you have the stomach for it. We are 33 issues in right now, and I hope we are just getting started. You can catch up today by getting the collected editions. It's highly recommended, one of the best books written today. From AWA, we have New Think, written by Greg Hurwitz. New Think is a series that explores the moral complexity between human social interactions and rapidly expanding technological advances. From its unique storytelling perspective, you find yourself at times uncomfortable, anxious, and ashamed about how close to home some of these stories really are. Greg covers topics such as mobile device and social media validation addiction, threats to freedom of speech, political divisiveness, and explores what past generations dreamt about when looking hopefully into the future. The artwork is extremely important as it plays a crucial role in how you process the messages in these stories. There is some levity at times, but it can slowly and almost unnoticeably start to sour page after page to match the pace of the twisted revelation unfolding in front of you. If you're looking for a book that smartly and accurately explores everything that is twisted with society and technology, but does so in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're watching the evening news or reading Facebook or Twitter, check out New Think today. Crimson Cage by John Lees and Alex and Ashley Cormack is yet another wrestling masterpiece that came out earlier this year. Despite the many Shakespearean Macbeth adaptations we've seen in the past, this story still feels incredibly fresh and unique. I think it has to do with the inherent message of human obsession, greed, and tragedy, but it's also backed up by incredible art and a modernization of a classic story in wrestling form. The art style is hauntingly beautiful and horrific at times. The characters are instantly recognizable, and even when you know their fate, you're still shocked by how it all comes together. I don't know what it is about these wrestling books this year, but they work perfectly in stories of struggle, self-destruction, revenge, even murder. John Lees has become one of my favorite writers over the last couple of years, and he absolutely murders it on Crimson Cage. Jason Aaron's Punisher admittedly took me a few issues to get into. The story was somewhat controversial before it even started due to a logo change that people assumed was a political move by Marvel. Then when the book came out, they seemingly rewrote the history of Punisher and Frank Castle, planting the seeds that even as a child, he was always destined to become the Fist of the Beast or the top killer and general for the Hand. As the story progresses, we learn that Frank's motivation is really twofold. He's surrounded by those who are encouraging his violent behavior, and they're giving him the one thing Punisher has always wanted, his family back. During the Punisher's rise to power, he gets on the radar of some powerful allies and villains, namely Ares, the God of War, and Daredevil and Elektra. This series loosely aligns with Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run, which adds another additional layer of context and sets up some potential battles. I love this book because it gives Frank Castle the resources and mythical abilities he needs to punish the real evils in the world. This book is gory, it's exciting, and I think it's heading in a really interesting direction. I can't wait to read more. Our next book is Rogues by Joshua Williamson and drawn by Leo Max. This book really came out of nowhere but blew me away. First as a DC Black Label format, being slightly larger and more square than your typical comic. Story-wise, we are reintroduced into the classic Rogues team about 10 years after they disbanded. Some of our Rogues went straight, some went on probation, some were imprisoned or in rehab. But after a series of unfortunate events, Captain Cold loses his job after trying to be an honest, normal, productive citizen, which causes him to break bad yet again. He gets back in touch with the other rogues to pull off one last over-the-top heist, entering Gorilla City and stealing Grodd's gold. What I love about this book are the character dynamics. The scenes feel so natural and they're paced perfectly. The story lingers just long enough for the readers to feel the weight of the moment, but instantly picks up during one of the many surprising twists. This story is really a tale of one man's obsession going to the point where it ruins the lives of the rest of the team. This book is exciting, it's action-packed, it's thoughtful, and it's something that I didn't know I needed in my life. This run by Joshua Williamson was a pleasant surprise. I'm so glad I got it. Check it out today. Thankfully, the long-awaited return of Saga came in 2022. Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples brought back the feels and memories instantly with issue number 55. Long-term readers of Saga are used to tragedy, but even I wasn't expecting the confirmation of a tragedy that happened in the last issue. We have somewhat of a time jump in this issue, showing readers our favorite family on the run and doing what they need to do to stay alive. Fiona Staples' art has certainly evolved since issue number 54 and really shows a level of new polish and beauty. This new story definitely feels like what we fell in love with in the beginning, a twisted plot of new characters, double-crossing, high stakes, and a sense of doom. Hazel takes on more of a main character role in this run, but we also touch base with other classic characters as well. I can't begin to explain how excited I am to have Saga back in my life, and I think it's a top 5 comic of all time. If you're new to Saga, check it out, but just remember the series is definitely for mature readers only. Now I know Geoff Johns' Junkyard Joe basically just started, but I would argue that it's one of the best comics out right now. We were introduced to Junkyard Joe in the pages of Geiger, written by Geoff Johns, and again in the Geiger one-shot that came out in early 2022. The US government assigns Junkyard Joe to an unsuspecting platoon during the Vietnam War. Slowly but surely, the soldiers begin to notice how different Joe is when they see him in action. His reflexes, senses, his demeanor are just unnatural. Eventually, the truth comes out about Joe really is, and something unexpected happens. Joe starts to become compassionate and protective. After a surprise ambush, one of our soldiers is able to escape thanks to Joe, who is later sent home, gets married, has kids, and lives out his civilian life as a cartoonist. This story really explores what happens to a robot soldier when he's seen too much and wants to reconnect with the only person he can trust. But as it's alluded to in the most recent issues, somebody's certainly out there looking for Junkyard Joe, and will do anything it takes to track him down. We've gotten 3 incredible issues so far, and definitely this book has the potential to hit the top 2023 lists next year. Rom V's Swamp Thing was so successful, they extended the original 10-issue run to 16. If you've been itching to get into Swamp Thing, this is a pretty good place to start, as Rom pays tribute to past runs using several references, lore, and characters. Rom also introduces a new avatar for the Green, Levi. The new host gives a reader a chance to learn about the character and not waste time overly explaining what's going on. In this later arc, we're exploring a new natural and unnatural concepts, the out-of-control self-enhancing machinations, and Trinity, the physical embodiment and result of nuclear destruction. Levi as Swamp Thing will have to combine powers with familiar heroes and ally with former rival family members to take on this new out-of-control mechanical threat. Perkins and Spicer on the art is just something you have to see to believe. They really are masters of the craft, blending panels and stitching scenes together in ways I've never seen or have seen since. If you like Rom's typical thought-provoking and mythical approach to storytelling, just wait till you read Swamp Thing. Mark Waid on Batman and Superman World's Finest is a breath of fresh air. In a world full of dark and depressing superhero and post-apocalyptic stories, World's Finest hits us with a brightly colored, action-packed, and nostalgic trip. This story begins with a classic villain trying to ruin the day for some innocent bystanders, but it quickly escalates into a battle of survival as Superman is essentially poisoned and loses control of his powers. With cameos from Doom Patrol, Supergirl, and other members of the Justice League, this book certainly has a star-studded cast. The story shifts into a mythical direction when they uncover a powerful being capable of possessing others. This new threat has been trapped for millennia, and he's trying to break free and absorb all the magical power in the world. It will take the combined powers of all of our heroes to stop this threat, and perhaps a few sacrifices as well. Dan Mora's art is absolutely beautiful, and every character and action scene really pops with clean, bright detail. If you're looking for something a little bit different, but also features our main DC heroes, try Batman and Superman World's Finest. Ed Piscor's first volume of Red Room totally blew me away, and I was excited to learn that he was dropping Volume 2, Trigger Warnings, in 2022. Pretty much being my first exposure to this type of comic, Trigger Warnings explores the Red Room universe yet again by giving us 4 all-new, independent, and insane stories. Featuring the highest level of gore and torture, Trigger Warnings is definitely not for the faint of heart. There's little I can show here that will be suitable for YouTube, but take it from me, it's insane. The best part though is Ed tells truly intriguing and complete stories filled with twists and turns. Trigger Warnings is properly titled and will surely be a great palate cleanser between your typical comic book hero experiences. Chip Zdarsky's Batman was a pleasant surprise after the meandering few issues after Tynan's run. He quickly removes us from the Fear State plotlines, reminding us what Batman is really about. Insane situations, awesome villains, and Batman finding a way through it all. We had several shocking moments in the opening issue, number 125, that helped us lead into Tom King's Killing Time run, which in my opinion was ultimately disappointing. With that said, Chip's run shows us a Tower of Babel-like contingency plan against Batman himself by introducing us to a new character, Failsafe. Failsafe is activated once Batman was accused of killing the Penguin and immediately shows the reader how powerful he really is. It's going to take not only the entire Bat family, but also members of the Justice League to stop this unstoppable, essentially indestructible Batman clone. Jorge Hernandez's art is detailed and dramatic and is really perfect for the story. I've never seen some of the perspectives he uses, and some of the shots are just truly amazing. If you want a deep cut, ultimate back against the wall Batman high action thriller, check out Chip's run, out now. Alright guys, so the next 5 books are the honorable mentions. I'm going to go over them right now. And the first book we're going to talk about is Absolution from AWA. We have Peter Milligan and Mike Deodato Jr. on here. It's a cool combination of like Running Man and Twitch.tv, whereas we're following our main character here on the cover. She's in this game right now to reach Absolution. How does she reach Absolution? She has to get enough points through the live feed on her body cam when she's making these assassinations and making these kills. So the audience of that show gives her points and can set her free if she gets enough points. If it goes in the other direction and she doesn't get enough points in time, she actually gets killed Suicide Squad style with bombs that were implanted in her. So of course this book is full of crazy events, awesome paneling from Mike Deodato Jr., and it has a really intriguing ending as well. It's a 5-issue run, definitely worth an honorable mention. Check this one out. The next book we're going to talk about is Rogues Gallery. This is from Hannah Rose May and from Justin Mason. This one actually wrapped up a few months ago as well, coming out of Image Comics. The basic premise here is there's some comic book guys and gals sitting around one day talking about how disappointed they were in the movie adaptation of one of their favorite books. The conversation gets a little bit too carried away, and they plan on terrorizing the lead actress in this film adaptation. The really cool thing about this story is we're led to believe one thing, that this actress is a big drama queen messing things up on the set, but actually she had her heart and soul in the project and it was kind of ruined from the top down. The kids in the story don't really care about that or know about that. They just want to seek revenge, and the only way they know how is to get violent, and they go in to attack her, but they may have bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. This is a really, really cool book. It's a nice little introduction to this writer. I haven't read anything from Hannah Rose May before. Really cool book. Check it out. Another cool book worth checking out from this past year is Twig from Scotty Young and Kyle Stram. Again, this series has ended, came out from Image Comics. It's a great hero's journey story, and the art is absolutely amazing in here. Now, it's not drawn by Scotty Young, but Kyle does a great job developing these characters, developing this world, and it was a pretty fun story as well. It did have some pacing issues, and it did have kind of an abrupt ending, definitely setting up for a volume 2, which I'm looking forward to personally. This was a book that a lot of people got, some people were specking on as well, left a few people disappointed, but I think it's just good enough to check out. I highly recommend it. Probably the best Aftershock book that came out this year was from Chris Condon. We have Hell is a Squared Circle. This is a one-shot wrestling book. And I know we've already had 2 other wrestling books on this list, but this one definitely deserves a spot because it was awesome as well. Now, I mentioned when we talked about Crimson Cage that wrestling just has this way of just being a good medium to tell these real dramatic stories, especially when it has to do with rising to the top, betrayal, violence, things like that, and we definitely get that in this book as well. We have our wrestler here who's been screwed over by the manager one too many times, seeks out his revenge, and tries to run away from the mistakes of his past. Just as he thinks he's gotten away with everything, the demons of his past catch up with him. I love the art style in this book. It's really great. The storytelling is beautiful in here, and it's just something you have to check out. I know it's a third wrestling book, but it definitely deserves a spot on the list. And the last honorable mention I wanted to bring up was Sarah Lone from Sumerian Comics. This is actually written by Eric Arno and art by David Morancho. And it's only about 3 issues in. That's why it's hitting that honorable mention spot right here. But it's a very interesting premise. We have this girl who's kind of left her father, left her family behind. He's in the fishing business and she's kind of doing some risque stuff now, but she's actually brought back into the small town she grew up in because her father was murdered. So now she has to resume control of the family business right here, but she gets wrapped up in some gangsters, she gets wrapped up with the US government, things like that. And ultimately it's a series about her uncovering some of her dad's secrets and how she cannot let that information slip out to the other people that are in her life. Now these issues are very compact. They're about 2 or 3 times longer than your average comic, but it's a great story, amazing artwork in here, translated out of French. It's a really fun read. Again, we're only 3 issues in at the moment, but it's actually a very interesting book, and I can't wait for issue number 4. So I hope you enjoyed that look of the best books that I read in 2022 and the honorable mentions as well. Now, if you had some books on your list of best books of 2022 that I didn't cover, please put them down below in the comments. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe, and share, and hit that bell notification to be alerted of future videos. I will see you all down in the comments.